The massive spaceship called Unity's Hope floated in the dark space between stars like a giant metal city. Inside its bright white halls, humans ran back and forth carrying papers and talking in worried voices. Today was the most important day in human history. Today, humans would meet the Draconian Empire for the first time. Ambassador William Carter stood in his small room, looking at himself in the mirror. His hand shook a little as he fixed his blue tie. He was 50 years old and had spent his whole life preparing for moments like this, but nothing could prepare him for meeting the Draconians. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They were giant reptile people who conquered planets and made other alien races bow down to them. Their war dragons were so scary that entire space fleets would give up fighting just to avoid facing them. "Daddy, why do you look so worried?" asked a small voice behind him. William turned around and saw his son Tommy sitting on the bed. The 6-year-old boy had messy brown hair and bright blue eyes that always seemed to be full of questions. Tommy was supposed to stay with the other families in the safe part of the ship, but somehow he always found his way to his father. "I'm not worried, Tommy," William said, trying to smile. "Daddy just has to meet some very important people today. Very big and strong people who might not like humans very much." Tommy tilted his head like he always did when he was thinking. "Are they mean?" "Not mean exactly," William said, kneeling down to be at eye level with his son. "They're just different from us. They think being strong and fighting is the most important thing. We think being kind and smart is more important. Sometimes it's hard for different people to understand each other." The door to their room made a beeping sound and slid open. A tall woman in a gray uniform walked in. Her name was Captain Lisa Stone, and she was in charge of the whole ship. "Ambassador Carter," she said in a serious voice, "the Draconian ships have arrived. 3 massive battle cruisers just appeared on our screens. They're each 10 times bigger than our ship." William felt his stomach drop. He had hoped the Draconians would send just one small diplomatic ship. 3 battle cruisers meant they were either very scared of humans or they wanted to show how powerful they were. Maybe both. "How long until they board our ship?" William asked. 1 hour, Captain Stone replied. "Their leader is someone called War Chief Gorth. Our computers don't have much information about him, but we know he's never lost a battle. He's bringing his personal war dragon with him." Tommy's eyes got very wide. "A real dragon? Like in my storybooks?" Captain Stone looked down at the little boy with surprise. She had forgotten he was there. "Not exactly like in books, Tommy. This dragon is real and very dangerous. It's as big as our dining hall, and has teeth as long as your arm. It has fought in hundreds of battles and has never been defeated." Instead of looking scared, Tommy looked excited. "Can I see it?" "Absolutely not," William and Captain Stone said at the same time. "Tommy, you have to promise me you'll stay in the family area with Mrs. Johnson and the other children," William said firmly. "This meeting is very dangerous. If something goes wrong, these aliens might hurt us. I need to know you're safe." Tommy's face fell. "But I want to help you, Daddy." William picked up his son and gave him a big hug. "You helped me by being safe. That's the most important job you can do today." After Captain Stone left, William took Tommy to the family area. This was a part of the ship where the families of important people stayed during dangerous missions. Mrs. Johnson was an older woman who took care of the children when their parents had to work. She had gray hair and kind eyes and always carried cookies in her pockets. "Don't worry, Ambassador," Mrs. Johnson said as she took Tommy's hand. "I'll keep him busy with games and stories. He won't even think about leaving this room." William kissed Tommy's forehead and walked away, not seeing the determined look in his son's eyes. The next hour passed very slowly. William and his team of diplomats prepared their presentation in the main meeting hall. They set up a big table with chairs for both humans and Draconians. They practiced what they would say and how they would act. Everything had to be perfect. Captain Stone's voice came over the ship's speaker system. "All crew members, the Draconian shuttle is approaching. Everyone except the diplomatic team should stay in their quarters. I repeat, everyone should stay in their quarters." William straightened his tie one more time and walked to the docking bay, where the Draconian shuttle would arrive. His team of 5 other diplomats followed him. They all looked nervous but tried to appear calm and confident. The docking bay was huge and cold. Bright light shone down from the ceiling, making everything look very white and clean. The big metal doors that led to space were sealed shut, but everyone could hear the rumbling sound of the Draconian shuttle getting closer. "Remember," William said to his team, "we bow slightly when we meet them, but we don't get down on our knees. We're equals in this negotiation, not servants. We speak clearly and slowly. We don't make any sudden movements. And whatever happens, we stay calm." The metal doors opened with a loud hissing sound. Cold air rushed in, making everyone shiver. The Draconian shuttle was black and covered with sharp spikes. It looked more like a weapon than a vehicle for carrying diplomats. The shuttle's door opened and steam poured out. Through the steam, everyone could see a massive shape moving. The first Draconian to step out was so big he had to duck to fit through the doorway. He was 8 feet tall and covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His face was long like a crocodile's, with yellow eyes and sharp teeth. He wore a red cape and had metal decorations on his chest that showed he was very important. This was War Chief Gorth. Behind him came 4 more Draconians, each one almost as big and scary looking. They all carried weapons and looked around the docking bay like they were expecting a fight. But the most terrifying thing was what came out of the shuttle last. The war dragon was so big it barely fit through the shuttle door. Its body was covered in black scales that had white scars all over them from old battles. Its head was as big as a car, with bright red eyes and teeth as long as swords. When it breathed, smoke came out of its nose. Its wings were folded against its back, but everyone could see they were huge. Its tail had sharp spikes on the end that looked like they could cut through metal. This was Scarwing, War Chief Gorth's personal war dragon. Every person and alien in the galaxy knew this creature's name. It had destroyed enemy ships by itself. It had killed hundreds of warriors in single combat. Just seeing it made entire armies run away in fear. The dragon's red eyes looked around the docking bay, studying every human face. When its gaze fell on William, the ambassador felt like the dragon was looking right into his soul. He had to use all his training to keep from running away. War Chief Gorth stepped forward and spoke in a deep, rough voice. "I am War Chief Gorth of the Draconian Empire. We have come to speak with the humans about peace between our peoples. But know this, we are warriors. We respect only strength. If you show weakness, these talks will end quickly." William stepped forward and bowed slightly, just as he had practiced. "Welcome, War Chief Gorth. I am Ambassador William Carter, representing all of humanity. We are honored by your presence and hope we can find a way for our peoples to live together in peace." The war dragon made a low growling sound that echoed through the docking bay. Several of William's team members took a step backward. The dragon seemed to smile, showing all of its terrible teeth. "My dragon does not trust easily," War Chief Gorth said. "Scarwing has fought beside me for 20 years. It can smell fear and weakness. Your people smell of both." William felt sweat on his forehead, but kept his voice steady. "Perhaps we can move to the meeting hall, where we will be more comfortable. We have prepared food and drink according to your customs." The Draconians followed the humans through the ship's corridors. The war dragon walked behind everyone else, its claws clicking on the metal floor. Every person they passed in the hallways pressed themselves against the walls and stared in amazement and terror. In the family area, Tommy sat with Mrs. Johnson and 3 other children, tried to look like he was paying attention to her story about brave space explorers. But his mind was somewhere else. He kept thinking about the dragon his father had mentioned. A real dragon, right here on their ship. He had always loved dragons in his storybooks, and now there was a real one just a few hallways away. Mrs. Johnson was reading from a big book with colorful pictures. "And so the brave captain flew his ship through the asteroid field to save the space station," she read in a dramatic voice. Tommy raised his hand. "Mrs. Johnson, can I go get a drink of water?" "Of course, dear," she said without looking up from the book. "The water fountain is right outside the door." Tommy walked out of the room and immediately turned in the opposite direction from the water fountain. He had explored every part of this ship during the long trip through space, and he knew exactly how to get to the meeting hall. His father had said the dragon was dangerous, but Tommy wasn't scared. In all his favorite stories, dragons were just misunderstood. They seemed mean and scary, but really they just needed someone to be kind to them. The little boy walked through the corridors on his tiptoes, trying to be as quiet as possible. He could hear voices coming from the meeting hall up ahead. Deep, scary voices that must belong to the dragon people. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. He was excited to see a real dragon. As Tommy got closer to the meeting hall, he could hear his father's voice trying to sound calm and important. We believe that trade between our peoples could benefit both humans and draconians. We have resources you need, and you have knowledge we could learn from. Tommy peeked around the corner and saw the most amazing sight of his life. There, in the middle of the meeting hall, was the biggest, most magnificent creature he had ever seen. The dragon was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Its black scales shined in the bright lights, and its red eyes were like glowing jewels. This wasn't a monster from a scary story. This was the most wonderful thing Tommy had ever seen. Without thinking about danger or consequences or what the adults might say, Tommy stepped into the meeting hall with a huge smile on his face. Tommy stepped into the meeting hall with wonder in his bright blue eyes. The room was much bigger than he had imagined, with tall white walls and bright lights that made everything look clean and important. Around a large table sat the scariest-looking creatures he had ever seen, but Tommy wasn't afraid. He was fascinated. The draconians were even more amazing up close. Their green scales caught the light like pieces of emerald, and their yellow eyes glowed like tiny suns. They were so much bigger than humans, with muscles that looked like they could lift cars. But what took Tommy's breath away was the magnificent dragon lying beside the table. Scarwing was the most beautiful thing Tommy had ever seen. The dragon's black scales were like polished stone, and the white scars that covered its body looked like lightning frozen in time. Its head was as big as Tommy's whole body, with a long snout full of teeth that gleamed like white daggers. When the dragon breathed, small puffs of smoke came from its nostrils, making it look like a living volcano. The adults around the table were talking in serious voices about trade agreements and peace treaties, but Tommy only had eyes for the dragon. In all his storybooks, dragons were magical creatures that could fly through clouds and breathe fire like tiny stars. This dragon looked exactly like the ones in his favorite bedtime stories. Ambassador William Carter was in the middle of explaining human mining techniques when he noticed something moving at the edge of his vision. He turned his head and felt his heart stop. There, standing in the doorway with a huge smile on his face, was his 6-year-old son. "Tommy," William whispered in horror, trying not to make any sudden movements that might alarm the draconians. "Get back to your room right now." But Tommy didn't listen. He had spotted the dragon, and nothing else in the universe mattered. With a fearless curiosity that only children possess, he began walking slowly toward Scarwing. War Chief Gorth noticed the small human approaching and growled deep in his throat. "What is this? Why do you bring a hatchling to our war council? He's not supposed to be here," William said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Tommy, please come back to Daddy right now. These people are trying to have an important meeting." The other human diplomats sat frozen in their chairs, afraid to move or speak. They had all heard stories about what draconian war dragons did to enemies. Captain Stone, who had been standing by the wall, reached slowly for her communication device to call security. But Scarwing had already noticed the small creature walking toward it. The dragon's massive head turned, and its glowing red eyes focused on Tommy with the intensity of a laser beam. For 20 years, Scarwing had known only battle and blood. It had fought against the fiercest warriors in the galaxy and had never met a creature that didn't either attack it or run away in terror. This tiny human was doing neither. Tommy walked closer, his small hands clasped behind his back, like he was approaching a friendly puppy in a park. "Hello, dragon," he said in his sweet child voice. "You're even more beautiful than the dragons in my books. What's your name?" Every adult in the room held their breath. War Chief Gortha's hand moved slowly toward his weapon. The other draconians tensed their muscles, ready to leap into action if their war dragon was threatened. Even they weren't sure what Scarwing would do when faced with such an unusual situation. The dragon tilted its enormous head, studying this strange, small creature. Scarwing had excellent senses and could smell that the little human had no weapons, no armor, and no fear. The child's heart was beating fast, but not with terror. It was beating with excitement and joy. "Tommy, please," William begged quietly. "Come to Daddy right now. That dragon is very dangerous." "He doesn't look dangerous," Tommy said, still walking forward. "He looks sad." "Are you sad, dragon? Is that why you have all those scars? Did someone hurt you?" Scarwing made a sound that was part growl and part whine. No creature had ever asked if it was sad before. No one had ever cared about its scars except to fear them. The dragon lowered its massive head until it was level with the small human. Tommy stopped just a few feet away from the dragon's snout. He could feel the warm air from its breathing and smell the smoky scent that surrounded it. Up close, he could see that the dragon's red eyes weren't angry or mean. They were just very, very lonely. "You're not scary at all," Tommy said softly. "You're just big and strong. My daddy says being big and strong doesn't make you mean. It just means you can protect people you care about." William wanted to rush forward and grab his son, but he knew that any sudden movement might trigger the dragon's attack instincts. All he could do was watch in terror as his little boy reached out his small hand toward the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. War Chief Gore started to speak, but something in his dragon's posture made him stop. In all their years together, he had never seen Scarwing act like this. The dragon was completely still, but not with the stillness of a predator about to strike. It was the stillness of a creature that was curious about something it had never encountered before. Tommy's hand touched the dragon's snout just above its nostrils. The scales felt warm and smooth, like polished stones that had been sitting in sunlight. Scarwing didn't pull away or snap its jaws. Instead, it made a soft, rumbling sound deep in its chest, almost like a giant cat purring. "See," Tommy said, looking back at all the worried adults. "He likes being petted. All animals like being petted if you're gentle and kind." The dragon's eyes slowly closed as Tommy's small hand stroked its snout. For the first time in its long life of battles and bloodshed, Scarwing felt something it had never experienced before. Peace. This tiny creature wasn't afraid of its size or its scars or its reputation. This small human saw it not as a weapon of war, but as a living being that deserved kindness. Tommy smiled even wider. "You know what? You remind me of my stuffed dragon at home. His name is Smokey because he's gray like smoke. But you're black like the night sky, so maybe your name should be Starry or Shadow or something pretty like that." "Its name is Scarwing," War Chief Gore said quietly, his voice filled with amazement. "It has been my companion in battle for 20 years, and it has never allowed any creature to touch it except me." "Scarwing," Tommy repeated, trying out the name. "That's a good name, but it sounds kind of sad. Can I call you Star instead? Because your eyes shine like stars." The dragon opened its eyes and looked directly into Tommy's face. Something passed between them in that moment, something the adults couldn't understand. It was recognition, acceptance, and the beginning of a friendship that would change the course of galactic history. Without warning, Tommy rose up on his tiptoes and planted a gentle kiss right on the tip of Scarwing's snout, just like he did every night with his stuffed dragon before going to bed. The effect was immediate and shocking. Scarwing's eyes went wide with surprise, and it made a sound that was part roar and part sigh. The dragon had been kissed by thousands of creatures in its imagination, but never in reality. In draconian culture, touching snouts was the most intimate gesture possible, reserved only for the closest family members. Every draconian in the room gasped in unison. War Chief Gorth dropped his weapon and stared in complete disbelief. His war dragon, the terror of the galaxy, the creature that had single-handedly destroyed enemy fleets, was being kissed by a human child who barely reached its knee. And Scarwing was enjoying it. The dragon closed its eyes again and leaned into Tommy's touch, making soft rumbling sounds of contentment. Its massive tail, which had destroyed so many enemies, swayed gently back and forth like a happy dog's tail. "There," Tommy said proudly. "Now we're friends. My mommy always says that a kiss can make anything better, even if someone is hurt or scared or lonely. Are you feeling better now, Star?" Scarwing opened one eye and looked at Tommy, then made a sound that could only be described as a dragon's version of a happy sigh. The creature that had never shown affection to anyone except its rider was completely enchanted by this fearless little human. William finally found his voice. "Tommy, That was very brave, but you need to come back to Daddy now. We have important work to do. Can Star come with us? Tommy asked hopefully. I think he wants to be friends with everyone. He's not mean at all. He's just been lonely. War Chief Gorth was struggling to understand what had just happened. His worldview, built on strength and conquest and the fear that his dragon inspired, was crumbling before his eyes. How could this small, defenseless creature do something that no warrior in the galaxy had ever achieved? How could a simple kiss transform the fiercest predator into a gentle companion? Small human, War Chief Gorth said slowly, what you have done is impossible. Scarwing has never allowed anyone but me to touch it. It has killed creatures 10 times your size for approaching too quickly. Yet you kissed it, and it did not harm you. How is this possible? Tommy shrugged, the way children do when adults ask them to explain something that seems perfectly obvious. I was nice to him. Everyone likes it when people are nice to them, even dragons. Captain Stone, who had been frozen by the wall during the entire encounter, slowly lowered her communication device. She realized that calling security would be pointless now. The most dangerous moment in human history had just turned into the most extraordinary moment in human history. The other human diplomats were beginning to breathe again, though they still couldn't quite believe what they had witnessed. Their carefully planned negotiations about trade agreements and territorial boundaries suddenly seemed much less important than understanding how a 6-year-old boy had just solved the galaxy's most complex diplomatic problem with a single kiss. Scarwing lifted its great head and looked around the room at all the staring faces. For the first time in its life, it didn't see fear in their eyes. It saw wonder, amazement, and perhaps the beginning of respect for something other than its ability to destroy. Tommy patted the dragon's snout one more time. Don't worry, Star. I think everyone wants to be your friend now. Sometimes people are just scared because they don't understand. But once they see how nice you really are, they'll love you just like I do. The little boy turned to his father with bright, happy eyes. Daddy, can we keep him? I promise I'll take good care of him and teach him how to play games, and maybe he can sleep in my room, and we can read stories together and... William looked at his son, then at the dragon that was now watching Tommy with something that looked suspiciously like adoration, then at the Draconian War Chief, who was staring at both of them with complete bewilderment. Everything had changed in the span of a single kiss, and William wasn't sure if that was the best thing or the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to humanity. Within hours of Tommy's kiss, the news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Captain Stone had tried to keep the incident classified, but word leaked out when one of the human diplomats called his wife on Earth to tell her they were all still alive. From there, the story jumped from one communication network to another, growing more incredible with each telling. On the human homeworld of Earth, news reporters scrambled to understand what had happened. The headlines were almost too strange to believe. Human child kisses galactic terror dragon. 6-year-old achieves what armies could not. Diplomatic breakthrough through dragon kiss. In the crowded news studios of New Tokyo, anchor Maria Santos struggled to keep her voice steady as she read the breaking news. We're receiving reports that first contact with the Draconian Empire has taken an unexpected turn. According to sources aboard the diplomatic vessel Unity's Hope, a human child has somehow befriended the war dragon known as Scarwing, the most feared creature in the known galaxy. On the farming colonies of Alpha Centauri, families gathered around their communication screens to watch the fuzzy video footage that had been smuggled off the ship. The grainy images showed a tiny human boy reaching up to touch the snout of a massive black dragon, but the quality was too poor to see the details clearly. Is this real? Asked Farmer Jim Bradley as he watched the footage with his 3 children. Can dragons really be friendly? His 8-year-old daughter Emma pressed her face closer to the screen. If that little boy can make friends with a dragon, maybe I can make friends with the scary creatures in our barn too. The story reached the Outer Rim territories where human miners and traders lived in rough conditions, always worried about alien attacks. In the bars and supply stations, tough men and women who had fought off pirate raids sat in stunned silence as they watched the news reports. A kid did what now? Asked mining foreman Pete Murphy, spitting his drink across the table. That dragon has destroyed entire battle fleets. How does a little boy just walk up and pet it like it's a puppy? But the humans weren't the only ones talking. Across the galaxy, other alien species were watching news with equal amazement. The insectoid collective, whose hive queens ruled through pure logic, couldn't understand how such a logical action had produced such a powerful result. Queen Buzzer 7 transmitted her confusion to her sister queens. The small human violated all survival protocols. It approached a superior predator without weapons or armor. According to all logical calculations, it should have been destroyed immediately. Yet the predator submitted to the small human's dominance. This does not compute. The crystal people of the Andromeda sector, who communicated through light patterns, flashed their bewilderment in brilliant colors across their home worlds. They had studied human behavior for decades, but had never seen anything like this. Their greatest scholars gathered in their crystal caves to debate what this meant for interspecies relations. Elder Prism Light spoke in patterns of blue and gold. Perhaps we have misunderstood humans entirely. We have focused on their technology and their wars. But maybe their true strength lies in something we cannot measure with our instruments. Even the mysterious shadow beings, who rarely paid attention to the affairs of physical creatures, were intrigued by the news. They whisper among themselves in languages that existed only in dark spaces between stars. The small flesh creature has done something that defies a natural order. Perhaps these humans are more than they appear to be. But nowhere was a reaction stronger than in the Draconian Empire itself. On the capital world of Draco's Prime, the news hit like a nuclear explosion. The Great Council of War Chiefs, who had ruled through fear and strength for 1,000 years, gathered in an emergency session to discuss what this meant for their entire civilization. War Chief Brutus, the largest and most savage of all the Draconians, slammed his massive fist on the council table. This is impossible. Scarwing is the most feared war dragon in our history. It has killed thousands of enemies. How can it be defeated by a tiny human hatchling who carries no weapons? War Chief Magna, an older female with scars covering half her face, studied the reports more carefully. The small human did not defeat Scarwing through combat. It used something else. Something we do not understand. Weakness, roared War Chief Brutus. The human showed weakness, and somehow this confused our dragon. This proves that humans are not worthy opponents. We should conquer them immediately before they spread their weakness to other species. But War Chief Razor, who was known for his strategic thinking, shook his massive head. No, brother. If this were weakness, Scarwing would have destroyed the small human instantly. Our dragons are bred to eliminate weakness wherever they find it. But Scarwing did not attack. Instead, it protected the human child. This suggests the human displayed something our dragons recognize as strength, but a type of strength we do not understand. The debate raged for hours. Some war chiefs wanted to recall War Chief Gorth and his dragon immediately, declaring the peace talks a failure. Others wanted to send more dragons to study this strange human behavior. A few suggested that maybe they needed to reconsider their entire approach to dealing with other species. In the dragon breeding caves deep beneath the capital city, the news caused even more confusion. The dragon handlers, who had spent their lives training the great beast for war, couldn't believe what they were hearing. Master Handler Clawstrike had raised war dragons for 50 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Bring me the recordings again, he demanded of his assistant. I must see this with my own eyes. As he watched the grainy footage of Tommy kissing Scarwing's snout, Master Handler Clawstrike felt his worldview crumbling. Everything he knew about dragon behavior suggested this was impossible. War dragons were conditioned from birth to trust only their assigned rider and to view all other creatures as either allies to be protected or enemies to be destroyed. How did the small human bypass 20 years of conditioning in a single moment? He muttered to himself. What does this child possess that our greatest warriors do not? Meanwhile, back on Unity's Hope, Tommy was completely unaware that he had become the most famous child in the galaxy. He was sitting in the ship's cafeteria, sharing his lunch with Scarwing, who had refused to leave the boys' side since their first meeting. The dragon had somehow managed to squeeze its massive body through the cafeteria doors, knocking over several tables in the process. Now it lay curled around Tommy's chair like an enormous guard dog, occasionally accepting pieces of fruit from the boys' plate. You don't eat meat? Tommy asked curiously as he offered Scarwing a piece of apple. I thought all dragons breath fire and ate knights and stuff. War Chief Gorth, who was sitting at a nearby table trying to understand what had happened to his fearsome companion, explained quietly, Scarwing eats meat, but it prefers fruits and vegetables. Most people do not know this because they never offer food to war dragons. They only see us in battle, when dragons are angry and breathing fire. Tommy nodded seriously. People think scary things about dragons because they don't really know them. Like how some kids at school think I'm weird because I like to read books instead of playing sports. But I'm not weird, I just like different things. Ambassador William Carter watched his son from across the cafeteria with a mixture of pride and terror. He had spent the morning fielding communication requests from every major news network in human space. Everyone wanted to interview Tommy, but William wasn't sure his 6-year-old son was ready for that kind of attention. Captain Stone approached his table with a serious expression. Ambassador, we have a problem. 3 more Draconian battle cruisers just arrived. They're requesting permission to send boarding parties to observe the human child and the dragon interaction. William felt his stomach drop. Are they hostile? Unknown, Captain Stone replied. But they're not following standard diplomatic protocols. They're treating this more like a scientific expedition than a military operation. They want to study what makes human children different from adult humans. At another table, the human diplomatic team was struggling to process what had happened to their carefully planned negotiations. Dr. Sarah Chun, the team's xenobiologist, was taking notes frantically as she tried to understand the implications of Tommy's actions. We need to completely revise our understanding of draconian psychology, she said to her colleagues. Everything we thought we knew about their aggression patterns has been proven wrong in a single day. Dr. Michael Torres, the team's cultural specialist, was equally amazed. It's not just about draconian psychology. We need to understand what makes human children so effective at interspecies communication. Tommy did something that our best diplomats couldn't achieve with months of preparation. As they discussed the scientific implications, Tommy was having his own conversation with War Chief Gorth. The massive draconian had been watching the boy with fascination, trying to understand how such a small creature could have such a profound effect on his dragon. Small human, War Chief Gorth said carefully, Your people are very different from what we expected. We studied your wars and your weapons and your military strategies, but we did not study your younglings. Perhaps this was a mistake. Tommy looked up from feeding Scarwing another piece of apple. My daddy says that's what happens when grown-ups spend too much time thinking about fighting and not enough time thinking about being friends. Maybe if your people played with our people instead of fighting with them, everyone would be happier. The simple wisdom of the child's words hit War Chief Gorth like a physical blow. For the first time in his life, he wondered if strength through conquest was really the best way to build a civilization. Watching his feared war dragon contentedly eating fruit from a human child's hand, he began to think that maybe there were forms of strength his people had never considered. Across the galaxy, scientists and philosophers and military leaders were asking the same questions. What made human children so special? How could innocence and kindness accomplish what weapons and threats could not? And most importantly, what did this mean for the future of interspecies relations? The kiss that had lasted only a moment was sending shockwaves through 1,000 different worlds, and everyone wanted to understand how one small boy had changed the course of galactic history with nothing more than an open heart and a willingness to see a friend where others saw only a monster. In research stations and universities across human space, xenopsychologists were scrambling to develop new theories about child psychology and its applications to first contact situations. The old diplomatic protocols, based on military strength and economic leverage, suddenly seemed outdated and primitive. Dr. Amanda Wells, the director of the Interspecies Studies Institute on Mars, called an emergency meeting of her entire staff. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced to the gathered scientists, everything we thought we knew about alien contact has just been proven wrong by a 6-year-old boy. We need to completely rethink our approach to interspecies relations, and we need to do it fast. Because if the news reports are accurate, we may have just discovered humanity's greatest diplomatic asset, our children's ability to see beyond fear and find friendship in the most unlikely places. The ripples from Tommy's simple act of kindness were spreading faster than light itself. carried by quantum communication networks to every corner of the galaxy. And with each new world that heard the story, the same question arose. If a human child could befriend the galaxy's most feared predator, what other impossible things might be possible in a universe where innocence and courage could triumph over centuries of fear and mistrust? 3 days after Tommy's kiss changed everything, the peaceful atmosphere aboard Unity's Hope was shattered by urgent alarms. Captain Stone's voice echoed through the ship's corridors with barely controlled panic. All crew to emergency stations. We have hostile ships approaching at high speed. In the observation deck, where Tommy had been teaching Scarwing how to play a simple card game, the sudden noise made everyone freeze. The war dragon's head snapped up, its peaceful demeanor instantly replaced by the alertness of a trained killer. War Chief Gorth, who had been watching his dragon learn human games with amazement, immediately stood and reached for his weapon. What approaches? War Chief Gorth demanded as Captain Stone rushed into the room. 6 Draconian battle cruisers. Captain Stone replied, her face pale with worry. But they're not from your diplomatic fleet. Our sensors show they're armed for combat, and they're refusing to respond to our communication attempts. Tommy looked up from his cards with confusion. Are they coming to play too? I can teach them games just like I taught Star. War Chief Gorth's expression darkened as he studied the tactical display that Captain Stone handed him. These ships belong to War Chief Brutus and his faction. They believe that peace with humans is a sign of weakness. They have come to end these negotiations by force. Ambassador William Carter, who had been in his quarters reviewing peace treaty documents, arrived just in time to hear this terrible news. How many ships do we have for defense? Just our escort frigate Aurora. Captain Stone admitted. It's a fast ship with good shields, but against 6 Draconian battle cruisers. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew they were hopelessly outgunned. Scarwing made a low growling sound and moved closer to Tommy, as if sensing the danger approaching. The dragon's protective instincts, which had been dormant for the past 3 days while it played games and ate fruit, suddenly blazed back to life. Maybe we can run away, Tommy suggested hopefully. My daddy says sometimes it's smarter to run than to fight. War Chief Gorth shook his massive head. Draconian battlecruisers are faster than your human ships, and War Chief Brutus will not stop hunting until he's destroyed this vessel and everyone aboard it. He sees our peace talks as treason against the Empire. Through the observation deck's large windows, everyone could see the approaching ships growing larger. The Draconian battlecruisers looked like giant black weapons floating through space, covered with armor and bristling with cannons. Even from a distance, they radiated menace and power. Captain Stone's communication device crackled to life with an incoming message. The voice that came through was deep and harsh, filled with anger and disgust. Human vessel Unity's Hope, this is War Chief Brutus of the Draconian Imperial Fleet. You have corrupted one of our war dragons with your weakness. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Tommy tugged on his father's sleeve. Daddy, why is that dragon person so angry? Did we do something wrong? William knelt down to his son's level, trying to keep his voice calm despite the terror he felt. No, Tommy, you didn't do anything wrong. You showed kindness to Star, and that was a beautiful thing. But some people don't understand kindness. They think being strong means hurting others. War Chief Gorth stepped forward and activated the communication system. Brutus, this is Gorth. I am conducting official diplomatic negotiations on behalf of the Empire. You have no authority to interfere. War Chief Brutus's harsh laughter filled the room. Diplomatic negotiations? You have allowed your war dragon to be tamed by a human hatchling. You have brought shame upon all Draconians. I am here to restore our honor by destroying this vessel and everyone aboard it. Scarwing's growling grew louder as it heard Brutus's voice. The dragon's red eyes began to glow brighter, and small puffs of smoke started coming from its nostrils. Tommy noticed his friend's distress and gently placed a small hand on the dragon's snout. It's okay, Star, Tommy whispered. Don't let the mean dragon person make you angry. Being angry won't help anyone. The effect was immediate. Scarwing's growling quieted, and its eyes returned to their normal color. The dragon looked down at Tommy with something that could only be described as gratitude. War Chief Gorth watched this interaction with growing amazement. Even in the face of mortal danger, his war dragon was choosing to follow the guidance of a human child rather than its battle conditioning. This was unprecedented in Draconian history. Captain Stone checked her instruments again. They'll be in firing range in 10 minutes. I've sent distress signals to the nearest human fleet, but our closest ships are 3 hours away. We need to evacuate the civilians, William said urgently. At least get the children to the escape pods. No, Tommy said firmly, surprising everyone. I'm not leaving Star. He's scared and he needs his friend with him. War Chief Gorth knelt down beside the small boy. Young human, what approaches us is very dangerous. War Chief Brutus has 12 war dragons with him, each one trained for battle. Even Scarwing cannot fight so many enemies alone. Tommy looked thoughtful for a moment, then brightened with an idea. What if we don't fight them? What if we show them that Star is happy? Maybe if they see how nice dragons can be when they're loved, they'll want to be nice too. The adults exchanged worried glances. The innocence of childhood was beautiful, but it wouldn't stop battle cruisers armed with planet-destroying weapons. Captain Stone's communication device buzzed again. This time the message came from her own ship. Captain, we're receiving additional signals. 3 more fleets are approaching our position. More Draconians? William asked with growing despair. Unknown, Captain Stone replied, checking her sensors. The signatures are unusual. I'm reading ships from at least 6 different species. Insectoid crystal people, shadow beings, and others I can't identify. War Chief Gore studied the sensor readings with confusion. This makes no sense. Why would so many different species come to this remote location? The answer came through the main communication channel in multiple languages and transmission methods. The first voice belonged to Queen Buzzer 7 of the Insectoid Collective. We have come to observe the human child who has achieved the impossible. Our hive queens wish to study this new form of diplomacy. A pattern of lights that translated as crystal people speech followed. We have traveled far to witness the small human who speaks the language of hearts rather than weapons. Even the mysterious shadow being sent a message in their whisper language. The flesh child has done something that interests us. We would see this miracle with our own eyes. War Chief Brutus's angry voice cut through the alien communications. I care nothing for your curiosity. I have come to destroy the humans and reclaim our dragon's honor. Any who interfere will share their fate. But as the various fleets moved into position around Unity's Hope, something unexpected happened. The alien ships didn't retreat from Brutus's threats. Instead, they formed protective formation around the human diplomatic vessel. Queen Buzzer 7 transmit again. War Chief Brutus, your actions threaten a being of great scientific interest. The Insectoid Collective will not permit harm to come to the small human or its dragon companion. The crystal people flashed their agreement in brilliant patterns of light, while the shadow beings whispered their support through dark space. Tommy watched through the observation window as dozens of alien ships surrounded them. Instead of feeling scared, he felt excited. Look, Star, all these people came to visit us. We're going to have the biggest party ever. Scarwing looked out at the gathering fleets and made a sound that was part confusion and part wonder. The dragon had spent his entire life believing that strength came from inspiring fear. But now it was seeing strength of a different kind, the strength that came from inspiring friendship and curiosity. War Chief Gorth activated his communication system and sent a message directly to his own people's ships. Warriors of the Draconian Empire, witness what has occurred here. A small human child has accomplished through kindness what we have never achieved through conquest. Our war dragon, the terror of the galaxy, has found peace and friendship. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider what true strength means. On board War Chief Brutus's flagship, the crew was growing nervous. They had expected to find a single human ship defended only by traitors. Instead, they faced a coalition of alien species, all united in protecting one small boy and his dragon friend. War Chief Brutus's second-in-command, a younger Draconian named Sub-Chief Talon, approached his leader cautiously. War Chief, the odds have changed significantly. We are outnumbered 30 ships to 6. Numbers mean nothing. Brutus roared. We are Draconians. We do not retreat from inferior species. But even as he spoke, Brutus could see doubt in the eyes of his crew. They were brave warriors, but they were not fools. fighting against overwhelming odds for a cause that fewer and fewer of them understood seemed less like honor and more like suicide. Meanwhile, Tommy had an idea. "Daddy, can I talk to the angry dragon person? Maybe if I explain how nice Star really is, he won't want to fight anymore." William's protective instinct screamed against the idea, but War Chief Gorth nodded slowly. Perhaps the small human's words might reach where our weapons cannot. Captain Stone established a communication link, and Tommy's sweet child voice was broadcast to every ship in the gathering fleet. "Hello, angry dragon person. My name is Tommy, and this is my friend Star. He used to be sad and lonely, but now he's happy because he has friends who love him. Don't you want your dragons to be happy too?" The silence that followed was deafening. On every ship, in every language, beings who had never heard a human child speak before listened to Tommy's innocent words and wondered perhaps there was another way to resolve conflicts besides violence. War Chief Brutus found himself at a loss for words. How do you respond with threats and anger to a child who only wants everyone to be happy? How do you maintain your reputation as a fierce warrior when faced with such pure innocence? Scarwing, sensing that this was an important moment, moved to the communication console and made a deep, rumbling sound that was transmitted to all the ships. It was not a roar of challenge or a growl of anger. It was the sound of a contented dragon, speaking to its own kind about the joy it found in friendship. On the Draconian battle cruisers, 12 war dragons heard their companion's message and began to make similar sounds. For the first time in their lives, they were hearing what a truly happy dragon sounded like. And in that moment, as the sound of peaceful dragons echoed across the cosmos, everyone began to understand that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way for the galaxy to work together. The sound of peaceful dragons singing to each other across the void of space changed everything. War Chief Brutus stood on the bridge of his flagship, listening to his own war dragons make sounds he had never heard before. These were not the roars of battle or the growls of anger that he knew so well. These were sounds of joy, wonder, and something that seemed impossible for creatures bred for war. Hope. War Chief. Sub-Chief Talon said quietly, "Our dragons are responding to human child's dragon. They want to communicate with it." Brutus felt his worldview cracking like ice in springtime. For 50 years, he had believed that strength came only from conquest and fear. The idea that dragons could be happy without battle, that they could find purpose in something other than destruction, was shaking the very foundation of everything he had built his life upon. On Unity's Hope, Tommy was delighted by the dragon songs echoing through space. "Listen, Star, your friends are singing to you. They want to be happy like you are." Scarwing lifted its massive head and sang back, a deep melodious sound that seemed to carry emotions across the darkness between stars. The dragon was telling its companions about friendship, about gentle touches, about the joy of being loved rather than feared. Ambassador William Carter watched the unprecedented scene through the observation window. Dozens of ships from different species floated in space around them, all united by their fascination with his 6-year-old son. The boy who had just wanted to pet a dragon had accidentally created the largest peaceful gathering in galactic history. Queen Buzzer Seven's voice buzzed through the communication system. "The small human has demonstrated a form of diplomacy unknown to our collective. We request permission to study this child's methods for future peaceful contact protocols." The crystal people flashed their agreement in brilliant patterns of light that painted rainbow colors across the hulls of nearby ships. Their message was clear. They too wanted to learn from Tommy's example. War Chief Gorth, who had spent the last few days watching his fearsome war dragon play games and eat fruit with a human child, stepped forward to address the assembled fleets. "Beings of many worlds, what you have witnessed here challenges everything we thought we knew about strength and power. This small human has achieved through kindness what our greatest warriors could not achieve through conquest. Perhaps it is time for all of us to reconsider our ways." On his flagship, War Chief Brutus was facing a rebellion unlike any in Draconian history. His own crew was refusing to follow orders to attack. The dragons in the cargo holds were singing songs of peace instead of preparing for battle. His warriors were asking questions that had no place in military doctrine. War Chief, his chief gunner asked hesitantly, "If the human child can make our dragons happy without fighting, why do we need to fight at all?" It was a simple question that cut to the heart of everything Brutus believed. He had spent his entire life convinced that the strong must dominate the weak. That peace was a luxury only the victorious could afford. But watching a 6-year-old boy surrounded by the protection of alien fleets, seeing his own dragons refuse to prepare for battle because they were too busy singing about friendship, Brutus began to wonder if perhaps he had been wrong about everything. Tommy, unaware of the internal struggle happening on the enemy's ships, had another idea. "Daddy, can we invite the angry dragon person to come play with us? Maybe if he meets Star, he'll see how nice dragons can be when they're not fighting." William looked at War Chief Gorth uncertainly. The idea of inviting the enemy commander aboard their ship seemed like madness. But then again, everything that had happened in the past week had seemed like madness. War Chief Gorth nodded slowly. In our culture, refusing a child's invitation is considered the deepest form of dishonor. If the small human offers welcome to Brutus, he must either accept or admit cowardice before the entire galaxy. Captain Stone activated the communication system, and Tommy's voice was broadcast to all the ships. "Hello, angry dragon person. Would you like to come visit us? Star really wants to meet your dragons, and I can teach you how to play card games. They're really fun once you learn the rules." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. On dozens of ships, beings from across the galaxy waited to see how the most feared Draconian war chief would respond to a polite invitation from a human child. Finally, War Chief Brutus's voice came to the speakers, but it sounded different than before. The anger was gone, replaced by something that might have been confusion or even curiosity. "Small human, why do you invite me aboard your vessel? Do you not know that I came here to destroy you?" Tommy thought about this for a moment, the way children do when adults ask them questions that seem to have obvious answers. "Well, you haven't destroyed us yet, so maybe you don't really want to. And besides, Star likes meeting new dragons. He gets lonely when he's the only dragon around." As if responding to its name, Scarwing moved closer to the communication console and made a soft rumbling sound that was clearly an invitation. The dragon was actually asking its former enemies to come and visit. War Chief Brutus found himself in an impossible situation. He had come here to restore Draconian honor through battle, but the enemy was offering friendship instead of resistance. His own dragons were singing instead of roaring. His crew was questioning orders instead of following them blindly. And a human child was inviting him to play games as if military conquest was just a misunderstanding that could be solved with conversation. "War Chief," Sub-Chief Talon said quietly, "our dragons are requesting permission to visit the human vessel. They wish to meet the dragon that has learned to sing songs of peace." Brutus looked around his bridge at the faces of warriors who had followed him through countless battles. These were not weak creatures who feared conflict. They were veteran fighters who had proven their courage in combat after combat. But now they were asking him to consider something that went against every military tradition they had ever known. "Prepare shuttle," Brutus said finally. "If this human child thinks it can change the nature of war itself, then perhaps it is time to see what this miracle looks like up close." An hour later, War Chief Brutus stepped aboard Unity's Hope, accompanied by 2 of his war dragons. The dragons were smaller than Scarwing, but equally impressive, with silver scales and bright green eyes. They moved carefully through the ship's corridors, clearly uncomfortable in confined space, but curious about what they would find. When they reached the observation deck where Tommy was waiting, the scene that greeted them defied every expectation. Scarwing, the terror of the galaxy, was lying on its side, while a 6-year-old boy used colored markers to draw pictures on its scales. The dragon was making soft purring sounds, clearly enjoying the attention. "Hi," Tommy said brightly, looking up from his artwork. "You must be the angry dragon person. I'm Tommy and this is Star. I was just drawing flowers on his scales because he said he always wanted to be pretty instead of scary." War Chief Brutus stared at the scene in disbelief. The most feared predator in known space was allowing a human child to decorate with flowers, and it seemed to be enjoying the experience. The 2 dragons that had come with Brutus approached Scarwing cautiously. In the wild, such a meeting would have resulted in territorial fighting. But instead of aggression, Scarwing greeted its visitors with gentle sounds and friendly body language. "Would your dragons like me to draw pictures on them too?" Tommy asked hopefully. "I have lots of different color markers, and I'm really good at drawing butterflies and rainbows." one of Brutus's dragons, apparently fascinated by the flower designs on scarwing scales, lay down beside Tommy and made a questioning sound. "I think she wants you to draw on her," War Chief Gorth translated with amazement in his voice. As Tommy began decorating the second dragon with pictures of butterflies, War Chief Brutus felt something fundamental shift inside his mind. These creatures, bred and trained for war, were choosing art over aggression, beauty over battle. They were discovering that there were purposes in life beyond conquest and destruction. How? Brutus asked quietly. How does one small human child accomplish what entire armies cannot? Ambassador William Carter, who had been watching the scene with his own sense of wonder, answered thoughtfully, "I think it's because Tommy sees what these dragons really are underneath all their training and conditioning. He doesn't see weapons or tools of war. He sees individuals who want to be loved and appreciated for who they are, not what they can destroy." Over the next several hours, more shuttles arrived from the various fleets surrounding Unity's Hope. Representatives from dozens of species came to witness the miracle of peaceful dragons and the human child who had made it possible. The observation deck became a gathering place for beings who had never trusted each other enough to meet in person. Queen Buzzer 7 arrived with several of her worker drones, their compound eyes reflecting the colorful dragon artwork with fascination. The Crystal People sent envoys whose bodies chimed with musical tones of wonder. Even the mysterious shadow beings materialized in the corners of the room, their whispered conversations filled with amazement. Tommy treated each new visitor like a potential friend, asking questions about their worlds and cultures with the innocent curiosity that only children possess. He drew pictures of the insectoids, learned light pattern words from the Crystal People, and even managed to make the shadow beings laugh with his silly jokes. As the day wore on, something unprecedented began to happen. The various species started talking to each other, sharing stories and ideas that they had never discussed before. The Crystal People discovered that their light-based communication could be translated into insectoid buzz patterns. The shadow beings found that their whisper language could convey emotions that other species had never experienced. War Chief Brutus, sitting beside his dragons as Tommy finished decorating them with pictures of stars and moons, made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "I formally request to join these peace negotiations," he announced to the assembled gathering. "If a human child can teach war dragons to choose art over aggression, then perhaps there are lessons here that the entire Draconian Empire needs to learn." Captain Stone, who had been coordinating the logistics of hosting dozens of alien delegations, activated the ship's main communication system. "This is Captain Stone of the Unity's Hope, transmitting on all frequencies to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Today, we are establishing the Innocence Protocol, a new approach to interspecies relations based on principles demonstrated by 6-year-old Tommy Carter. Any species that wishes to join this new era of peaceful cooperation is welcome to send representatives." Tommy looked up from his artwork, a blue marker in one hand and a dragon's head resting gently in his lap. "Does this mean everyone is going to be friends now?" War Chief Gorth, his fearsome reputation forever changed by a child's kindness, smiled for the first time in decades. "Yes, small human. I believe it does." As news of the Innocence Protocol spread across the galaxy, carried by quantum communication networks to every corner of known space, something beautiful began to happen. Worlds that had been isolated by fear started reaching out to their neighbors. Species that had never trusted each other began planning cultural exchanges. Military academies added courses on peaceful conflict resolution alongside their weapons training. And at the center of it all, a little boy continued to play with his dragon friend, completely unaware that his simple act of kindness had reshaped the galaxy itself. Sometimes the smallest gestures really can change everything, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer friendship to someone who has never experienced it before. The age of fear-based diplomacy was ending, and the age of friendship was beginning, all because one small human boy had seen a dragon not as a monster to be feared, but as a friend waiting to be loved.